Welcome back, everybody, to part two of the free agent signing grades. Going over just more grades. Hopefully, you watched the other video. We're gonna have quite a few parts. Last video we had 12 different players, so I'm gonna just keep going with 12, and we'll see how it goes. And let me know if you want me to do every single player, or if you want me to just do the top name guys. Like for instance, one that I was on the fence about doing was Jeff Okuda because he's got like a 1 year $4 million deal. And if I start going down that path, like I haven't been doing any kickers, but if there was any like game changing one, I would include that in there. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers. We're getting close, so help me get there. Tell your friends and tell your friends about Kirk Cousins' grade, getting a D plus. If you look, 4 year, 180 million is way too much. 100 million guaranteed is just insane. Like I don't understand why that was the move, and that like 45 million a year. He's coming off the Achilles injury. Um, I think he is the right fit for that offense. I think as far as they need a guy that can sit back there and just make the passes, and Kirk Cousins is going to be your guy for that. But I don't look at the Falcons as being a contender. I think they could win the division, but that's mostly because of how bad the division is. So paying him that much money, I just it's way too much for me. And 4 years, I feel like is too long. Kirk Cousins' agent does it again with a phenomenal deal for him. And I know he wants to be down there. His wife's family is all from Atlanta, um, but just I expected like a 4 year like 30-35 million coming off of an Achilles. And honestly, I didn't expect not a 4 year. I expected like a 3 year, like somewhere closer to a 3 year. Or even if it was like a 2 year, 40 million a year, like I could have listened to that. Like if it was 2 years, 80 million with 60 million guaranteed or something, that would make sense because he's very durable. That would guarantee you 30 million a year. You get him for 2 years, but locking in for 4 years, 180 million is just too much for me. He had the good experience with Kevin O'Connell and really started to be a little bit more ballsy and make more plays, throw the ball into tighter windows with Kevin O'Connell. And now he's kind of got to be the veteran mind in there. And, Raheem Morris is the head coach, a defensive minded coach, and the offensive coordinator is his name is blanking, but he was the Rams quarterback coach. So Kirk's going to kind of have to take over and be the guy. And I think the reason Kirk was able to have success in these past years is because Kevin O'Connell unlocked something. So we'll have to see if he can continue that, but it's a D plus for me. I think it's way too much money. Bryce Huff to the Eagles, pretty good grade, B minus. He really showed out. I believe there was some sort of a advanced stat like quarterback pressures or a pass rush win rate where Bryce Huff was like top two or three altogether. And with Eagles kind of getting older on the defensive line, Brandon Graham I believe just retired, and then yeah, I can't remember if it was. I know Fletcher Cox retired, but needed to fill a position. Hassan Reddick, I believe, is gone. So I can't remember all the details, but they definitely needed to replace an edge rusher. I also think that this means that clearly they have a bit of a problem with Nolan Smith because he was like super hyped for running a 4.3 40 as a defensive end, and then they just never played him that much, and now they've signed Bryce Huff. So I think it's a good signing, especially for the price too. He the all of the stats don't necessarily say that he's going to be a top defensive end, but the top defensive ends are making upper 20s, closer to 30, and I think the potential is really high for him. And with their lot of strong pieces throughout the defensive line already, I think adding it in makes it fair to be a B minus. Then Lloyd Cushenberry, I really like this just because if you watched the last video, I talked about how Tony Pollard was going into a bad situation, and the Titans had one of the lowest rated offensive line performances. I can't remember if it was through the last weeks or if it was through the whole season, but they were ranked like 32nd at one point for their offensive line. So to get a guy who I think was in the conversation for one of the best centers available. My personal favorite was Tyler Biotish, who went to the Commanders. I don't think I go over him in this video, but that'll be soon. He was my favorite, and Cushenberry not too far off as far as the average per year. And you get a 4-year, $50 million. I think he can be good for a while, and I think it's a nice start to repairing that offensive line. And like I said, I think 12.5 is a really fair price, and even maybe even a little lower than I would have anticipated, especially for that long of a contract at a 4-year, $50 million. So I think I give it a B. I think it was a pretty good signing for the Titans, and should be nice moving forward. Derace Armstrong, excuse me, C plus, kind of similar reasoning to who I just talked about, who went to the Eagles, Bryce Huff. Derace Armstrong doesn't really have as much. He doesn't have as much. Like the numbers don't show up as much for Armstrong. He good player, and he has done better. He's definitely improved these last 2 years. So reuniting with Dan Quinn, I think, is a good deal. I just think for his production, I don't think he's worth the $15 million a year. I could be way off. I'm looking at all these grades and go, wow, this guy's overpaid, this guy's overpaid, this guy's overpaid. And there is a good chance that I'm wrong, and that everybody's just making more money because the cap went up $30 million, which I could completely understand and I could listen to. But it just seemed like too much. He's had 2 years where he had decent sack numbers and pretty average tackles for a loss. So $15 million isn't too bad. So like I said, it is very average signing to me, but I like him teaming up with Dan Quinn because he really improved with Dan Quinn. So I like him teaming up back over there, and that's where we get the C plus with that 3-year, $45 million deal. Josh Jacobs to the Packers. I gave it a C plus. I had B minus, but then I was looking at the money, and running backs just really aren't getting these 4-year contracts. Some of the top guys will get these larger, longer contracts. And $12 million, I think, is a very fair price for Josh Jacobs. I actually think that's good, and that's why I was, roaming into the B minus, B plus range, and ended up going with the C plus because if you look, like, obviously last year Josh Jacobs completely fell off and did not have a good season. There was arguments to be made that he wasn't really being utilized very well. And actually towards the end, Antonio Pierce did start using him, the way he was supposed to, and he did show out again. Then you can think about the prior year where he led the league in rushing and had almost 1,700 rushing yards, and he played great. Then the year before, it was kind of average. He didn't really do very well. And then I believe his rookie year, he had another great year. But he's been kind of up and down, and I think the 4-year, $48 million, I personally, if you could have gotten Aaron Jones for that, or like a 3-year at $12 a year, I probably would have done that as opposed to Josh Jacobs. So I don't really like that. And it's crazy how the running back market is going because, they signed Josh Jacobs and you think him and Aaron Jones are going to be together. And then A.J. Dillon's still there. So then Aaron Jones gets released. And then similar thing happens, which will be in one of these next videos here, with the Bengals and Joe Mixon, where the Bengals signed Zach Moss, and then right after they released Joe Mixon. So now all of a sudden you've got Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon are available, and all the other guys who you thought were going to be the top guys, I guess just Saquon and Josh Jacobs, are already signed to other teams. So now still available is Derrick Henry, and the 2 guys that I just named that just disappeared from my head, Joe Mixon and Aaron Jones. So lots of good running backs still available. It's going to be interesting to see where they all go. But all in all, Josh Jacobs, C plus for me. Like I said, I think it's a little bit too long of a contract, and I think he's been a little too inconsistent, where I think Aaron Jones would have been the better option at that same price. So I give him a C plus. Baker Mayfield, I give a B. Notoriously, amongst my friend group, Baker Mayfield hater. Learning to like Baker Mayfield. And on my hate tier list, Jerry Jeudy tops it. DeAndre Swift is up there. And Baker Mayfield was always up there. But he is slowly crawling down the list. And I'm learning to like Baker Mayfield. I still think, in the past, I thought he was very overrated. And I think he's finally he's finally showing that he can be a starter, but we have to remember when he was drafted. And so I think it's still fair to say that, yeah, it's great that he's doing a lot better, but I would like to see him to keep improving. But I like the price at 3 years, 100 million, 33 a year is kind of, getting into that like bottom tier starting quarterback pay at this point. Like, if you look, I believe Tannehill, he's a free agent now, but I believe his contract was fairly close to 30 million. And so if you look at that, I think for the money, it's a good deal. You get to pair him back up with Mike Evans, keep him in a familiar place, and I like the deal. I gave it a B for Baker, and hopefully more winning for them. Saquon Barkley, B plus. Reason it's a B plus, I don't have all the numbers on the screen, but I will tell you why it is. So you see 3 year, 37.75 million, averaging 12.58 a year. Again, very similar average per year to Josh Jacobs, but there's a difference. His contract, Saquon's, can go all the way up to 47 million with incentives, and then he's only guaranteed 26 million. So if you look at it, it's really a perfect contract for Saquon Barkley, because Saquon Barkley is a good running back, but his biggest issues is the injury potential. So if he gets injured, 26 million over 3 years is, what is that, 9 million or 9 and some change. Or if he balls out, he can make up to 16 million a year. Now, that's a lot of money. I think it's 15.83, I think is actually the math if he were to get all of his incentives. But I see that as being honestly a great deal, because you're going to have some running from Jalen Hurts, which could limit the ability to get the incentives. We'll have to see what the incentives are to really grade everything properly. But as far as grading the signing, I think the contract was set up almost perfectly for Saquon Barkley, and I think it helps the Eagles in the case that if he balls out and he goes off, they're going to have to pay him more. But if he gets injured or misses time for whatever reason, they're going to save money. So I really like the structure of the contract, and that's why I gave it a B plus. Especially, the Eagles lose DeAndre Swift, who, again, I said I'm not very high on and not really a fan of. And at the minimum, as far as average per year out of Saquon, you're getting 9, which the first 2 years DeAndre Swift is making 8 million guaranteed his first 2 years. So if Saquon doesn't play well and gets injured or something, he's going to make similar to Swift. And then if he balls out, he's going to do great. So I love the structure. Great job by the Eagles, and great job by Saquon Barkley, making a near perfect contract. I think the high end, you could say it's a little overpaid, but again, we're talking about how the cap went up so much. So I don't really think it's that bad. Good deal for the Eagles. Blake Cashman to the Vikings, C plus. They're signing a lot of linebackers, which I thought was interesting. I do like how Brian Flores likes to move guys around on the defense, and I think Blake Cashman is a fit. 3 years, 25.5 million. Blake Cashman's kind of always been that like fringe backup starter guy where he definitely is good. So I thought it was a little high, but the linebacker is a big need for the Vikings, and that's kind of what was available. So I like it. I gave it a C plus. I think 8.5 million a year is still really not that much investment as far as what you can get. And again, I like how Brian Flores has been able to unlock some talent in some guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So I give it a C plus. I think decent deal for the Vikings. I think Cashman's probably getting a little more than he deserves, but I like the deal for both sides, so I give it a C plus. Bilal Nichols to the Cardinals. Big fan of Bilal Nichols as a Bears fan. He was on the Bears, and his last couple years with the Bears, he actually did very well for an interior defensive lineman. But his play has just slowly been declining with wherever he's going. So I give it a C minus, because although $7 million is a pretty decent deal and it's pretty cheap, his play really has kind of gone downhill. And he started most games last year and didn't really have much production at all. There's a reason that the Raiders got rid of him. And I kind of thought Bilal Nichols would get like a 1 year, like prove it deal. Like even if it was just 1 year, like 10 million or something, It might be overpay for that year, but kind of show that he can do it. But he gets 3 years, 7 million. So it's just I think 14 is guaranteed for this one, or a little over 14. So I would assume those first 2 years are pretty much guaranteed, and then the third year is just kind of a bonus, depending on how it plays out. So I don't know. I just is an interesting move for the Cardinals. They have a lot of money, so I would have thought that they went for a little bit higher tier, but maybe they see something in Bilal Nichols that I don't. Like I said, I was a big fan of him on the Bears, and he played very well, but unfortunately his play has just fallen off. So I give him a C minus for this trade. Antonio Gibson, one of my favorite deals, and I referenced him. If you watched the last video, I referenced him with the other running backs that were signed, and thinking about Antonio Gibson, looking back on his career, early on, he didn't really get much of an opportunity. His first year, and then I believe his second year, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. He's had over 10 touchdowns in a season before. And then he was a pretty reliable back on the ground. And then in these past couple years, he turned more into a receiving back. And you have to remember, he's 6'2", 220, and ran a 4.3 940. So he has the whole height, weight, speed ability of it. And it's really just been the teams he's been on has used, or I guess it's just Washington, but they had always used somebody else more as the primary back, and he never really got a fair opportunity. So to get him at 3 years, $11.5 million at 3.83 million a year, I just think it's a steal for the Patriots. And I don't have any evidence to show that he's going to be, a huge top guy, but it's the value is why I give it. I mean, for what he could be, I think the potential is still very high. You're getting a younger guy that had success running the ball when he was given the opportunity, and then kind of turned into a receiving utility back, and did that at fine. He was still pretty average, but I just don't think he's gotten a lot of opportunity. I talk the same way about Gardner Minshew. I think Gardner Minshew deserves to start in the NFL. He hasn't really gotten much of an opportunity to show what he can do, and even last year he comes in for the Colts and leads them to a 9-8 season in an offense that wasn't even designed for him. So I think this is going to be good. I hope Antonio Gibson's able to get more of an opportunity, and I'm hoping Gerard Mayo and the rest of his team can find a way to utilize him properly at that measly little $3.83 million a year. And then Andrew Van Ginkel. It's tough to not give him like an A+, just because, like, look at the picture. He looks like a Viking. This one, he has 2 bloody noses, blood all over his jersey. He's plugged him with, like, what, some cotton balls or something. He's an animal. I think this is good because he's a very versatile player. I was talking about earlier how Brian Flores likes to move guys around, and he's good at utilizing guys in different ways. For instance, Josh Metellus last year, I think, was probably the only player in the NFL. There was a stat that said he played 12 different positions throughout the year. He even started at nose tackle, and he's like a safety linebacker hybrid. And I don't think you have like a safety linebacker hybrid out of Van Ginkel, but this is going to be a guy who can drop back into coverage. He can be an edge rusher. He can be moved inside, and I don't think he's the best at any of these. I don't really think that he's a great player in any of those regards, but I think with Brian Flores' ability to move guys around and utilize players in unique ways, like Josh Metellus, moving him as like a safety, maybe linebacker size guy, moving him into nose tackle, and just doing all sorts of different stuff. I think Van Ginkel could offer a lot. 2 years, $10 million. It's a nice little trial, for the next 2 years. Brian Flores might not be around next year. So I like the contract. I think $10 million is a little too much. But again, I just think the fit for the Vikings with Brian Flores' defense is perfect, and that's why I give him the B- for that deal. Again, a little too much money for me, but I really like the fit. And then the final guy today, Robert Hunt. This is just way too much money for a guard. I was tempted to go D+ on this one, but the reason it still gets C+ for me is Carolina's offensive line is so bad, and they just desperately needed to make a move. and it just turned out that Robert Hunt was the move. 20 million a year, 5 years, 100 million is way too much money to me. I think he can get out. I think it's 60 million guaranteed. Um, but it's just too much money. I like if 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 it would have been less money, I could have this could be like if the money was more fair. Like we saw some other interior offensive linemen going for like mid-teens, like it was 15 million a year or something, and even maybe even shorter. I guess maybe you want to lock him in for 5 years, but I just think it's way too much money. Robert Hunt, if you haven't forgotten, he was the one who they threw a screen pass to him on Miami, and he like flipped into the end zone. So he athletic guy for being an offensive lineman. I don't see Carolina using him on a screen pass, but it would be fun. And I like Robert Hunt, but I just think 20 million is way too much for a guard. I don't know where I should have looked where that puts him on the list, but it's got to be near the top as far as guard pay, and I don't believe that he's worth top end or even like, if it's top 5 or top 10 for guards. I don't think he's necessarily worth that. So let me know what you think of my grades. If you think I was far off on any of them, or if there's anything that you would change, leave a comment down below letting me know. Like the video and subscribe, trying to get to 100 subscribers, and then keep an eye out for more videos because there's going to be a lot more of these grading videos. I'm going to try to get through every single player. So keep checking for those. Thank you for watching and have a great day.